Oh, good evening, everybody. That is good evening in the UK, good whatever it is in Australia and any other part of the world. And if you're watching this later on in video or live, good evening to you as well. Welcome to this really special event in IChemE's calendar, indeed the special event in IChemE's centenary year. I'm Stephen Richardson. Until 2 days ago, I was the immediate past president of IChemE. And before I go any further, I have to give you an important aside, which is if the alarms go off, and you will hear them if they go off, okay, you follow the signs down to the ground floor and we assemble underneath Waterloo Bridge. So even if it's raining, we'll be nice and dry. Okay, so if the alarms go, they're not a joke, they're not practice. We're here this evening to listen to the address by IChemE's 81st President, David Bogle. And we're going to start with an introduction from down under, from the past president now, Jane Cutler. Jane.
Good evening and welcome to President David Bogle's presidential address. David Bogle is Professor of Chemical Engineering and Pro-Vice Provost of the Doctoral School at the University College London. He joined UCL in 1990 after education at Imperial College, 3 years in industry and 3 years in academia in Australia. His expertise is in process systems engineering and in systems biology, working with a range of academic and industrial partners, particularly from the pharmaceutical industry. He is Associate Director of the Sargent Centre for Process Systems Engineering at UCL and Imperial College. He is Executive Editor for Process Systems Engineering for Chemical Engineering Science and served as Scientific Vice President of the European Federation of Chemical Engineering from 2017 until 2021. He has been an IChemE trustee and was awarded the IChemE Council Medal in 2006 for his leading role in the 2005 Chemical Engineering World Congress. As Pro-Vice Provost of UCL's doctoral school since 2005, he oversees early career researchers across all disciplines and was elected Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2005 and has recently been chairing the Engineering Ethics Reference Group for the Royal Academy and the Engineering Council. I commend to you President David Bogle.
Thank you all very much. So first of all, can I thank Jane for her kind words? And I know she is listening out there somewhere, even though that was an electronic version there. With the pandemic and travel restrictions, Jane has had a particularly tough presidency, unique in our history, but has been so impressive in keeping us focused on our reforms and looking to the future to ensure our profession makes its full contribution. I'd particularly like to thank her from all of us. It's been a pleasure working with both Jane and Stephen this last year, and I look forward to working closely with Jane and Nigel this next year, and with John for the next few months. You will all know by now that John is moving on to run the Mineral Products Association, and I would personally like to thank him for the outstanding job he's done over the last 5.5 years. He leaves the IChemE in a strong position for his successor. It's a great honour to be elected IChemE President, especially in the centenary year, and I'm looking forward to it immensely. I've been reading the articles and attending the centenary events with great interest. Oops, that was the... As Jane said, I'm a professor at University College London, often referred to as UCL, and the Chemical Engineering Department was established as the Ramsay Memorial Laboratory of Chemical Engineering in 1923, very soon after IChemE was founded. This was a key time for our profession and the industry it supports, following the end of the First World War. There was a clear consensus that there was a need for a more scientific approach to the design, construction and operation of chemical plants, a distinct place in the educational system for chemical engineering to have it, and for chemical engineering to have its own qualifying body. Here we see an image of the Hotel Cecil, where IChemE had its first meeting, and the original Ramsey Memorial Laboratory building. It scored a direct hit during the war, for the First World War, and was in the Second War, sorry, and was largely destroyed. But the facade remains, and the physics department is there now, which we can see on the right. You can see this picture that I took just the other day, and you can see where at the top where the lettering was covered over. The UCL, this is a picture of Sir William Ramsay. The UCL Ramsay Chair and Department was established to address the second of those objectives that I mentioned a minute ago, to establish a distinct place in the education system, with money raised following the death of Sir William Ramsay, who had been a professor of chemistry at UCL. Ramsay was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1904 in recognition of his services in the discovery of the inert gaseous elements in air, notably argon and later helium, neon, krypton and xenon. Peter Rowe, who was IChemE president in 1981-82, was Ramsay professor from 1965 to 1985. The ChemEng Evolution website has much more on the formation of IChemE and some of the debates about its formation and relationships with other related bodies such as the Society of Chemical Industry and the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. And I commend you to look at it. It's I found it very interesting anyway. So it's traditional to say a bit about oneself, as there will be many who don't know me. I was brought up in Australia. I know it doesn't sound like that. My parents, both Australian, decided to retire to England. Many said, "You must be joking." Around the time I started university. As Jane said, I did my studies and PhD at Imperial College London. I went to school near Melbourne and had started briefly at the University of Melbourne. And this photo was actually taken at the end of my sixth form year. It was taken by the National Press because I did particularly well in the Victorian High School certificate exams, and as you can see, I was at a music course at the time. I sought advice from David Wood, who many of you will know, and who sadly passed away this last year, and he was head of chemical engineering at that time. He recommended Imperial College, which he knew well, but also because it was next door to the Royal College of Music, as he knew I was a keen violinist. I did do some playing in the Royal College's Student Association Orchestra, as well as leading the Imperial College Symphony Orchestra for many years, and still have many musicians, friends from that time. Perhaps some may even have doubted my commitment to chemical engineering, but I hope I have proved them wrong. And so this photo was, oops, we come back here, let's go back. This photo was taken on a tour to Greece. It was orchestra, the Hertfordshire Chamber Orchestra, doing a concert in the main theatre in Thessaloniki, live on Greek radio, I seem to remember. Yes, my principal PhD supervisor at Imperial College was John Perkins, who's here this evening, and subsidiary supervisor Roger Sargent, both past IChemE presidents. The field of process systems engineering captured my interest, and I have worked to spread its utility within manufacturing and also well beyond. After my PhD, I decided to explore various options, first in industry, working for the British Gas Corporation here in London for some years on various modelling and control projects in gas processing. I then decided to explore my Australian roots and also academia, so took a lecturer post at the University of Adelaide, and this photo is taken in Adelaide one warm evening. I can't remember what we were doing, but I'm there in the middle. It's not my child. It's long before I was married. That's John's son Matthew, I think, and John Perkins there, and Mike Hanslow, who's also here this evening from Sheffield University, and Mike's wife Andrea, and a bassoon-playing friend of mine. I very much enjoyed my time there, but decided fairly quickly that I was more of a European and moved to University College London in 1990, where I have been ever since, 32 years and counting. I've been able to foster significant growth in process system engineering at UCL as part of our partnership in the Sargent Centre for Process Systems Engineering with Imperial College London, for which I am still Deputy Director. And this was picture, there's Roger Sargent, after whom we're named, who died, as you know, some years ago, also a past president. And this was the 2000 Roger Sargent lecture given by George Stephanopoulos from MIT there, next to Roger, and me, and Bill Wakeham, who was, I think, must have been Deputy Rector of Imperial College at the time. Also another past president of IChemE. My research has contributed to core systems topics such as control and optimization, but I've also brought it into biological and medical systems analysis, working for the last decade or so with various of our medical and life science departments on systems engineering of the liver, which I see as the body's chemical factory. Early in my time at UCL, I was vacation course tutor at the ExxonMobil complex in Hampshire, and I was particularly interested in a training course they undertook on what they called basic skills. It involved systematic planning in groups before undertaking a task, the sort of thing I felt that was missing in our project work, where students tend to get stuck straight into the detail without thinking about the wider purpose and goals. And this was the task grid that they used to use to explore. I expect many of you have seen things such as this, but it really helped them to focus more on the task, and we were able to build that into the training. My favourite task from the training that we used to do was survey the vehicles in the vicinity. If you haven't decided why you're doing this, who it's for, and what you will produce, and really explored this Ames grid, as they call it, the team is sunk, seriously sunk. At university, we have some particularly good opportunities to incorporate this, building in some generic skills while learning about technical material and producing better group work. This led me to a long interest in developing generic or transferable skills in the educational process. I was a member of a board at UCL looking at this across all disciplines and also latterly with researchers. In 2005, I was appointed to a more senior role within UCL as Pro-Vice Provost of the Doctoral School and Early Career Researchers. My role is to oversee our postgraduate and postdoctoral early career researchers across all disciplines, which we have over 11,000 at UCL. Researchers develop sophisticated generic skills in their journey to develop, demonstrate, and defend a substantive original idea. They often do not recognize these generic skills, so we've been raising their awareness and giving them the language to better put themselves forward to employers within and beyond academia. In this doctoral school, I have a significant profile internationally as chair of the League of European Research Universities Doctoral Studies Policy Group. And this is a map showing where all the LIRU, it's called LIRU, universities are across Europe. I've advised and reviewed doctoral education for many universities, funding agencies and ministries across Europe, looking at the quality of doctoral education processes, but also the way that they develop these generic skills. In recent years, I've also had a number of roles for the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK, including chairing committees supporting academic industrial partnerships in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the world. In spite of this diversion, I've always been active in chemical engineering research and teaching. I was drawn back more closely into a chemical engineering leadership role as European Federation of Chemical Engineering Scientific Vice President for the last few years, and now I'm very proud to have been elected the IChemE 81st IChemE President. So, I take it up at a time of celebration for our centenary, but also, of course, a time of concern. The war in Ukraine has disturbed us all. We have divided populations in many countries, rising inequality, and we confront the climate emergency, which is the existential threat and where we chemical engineers have a major part to play. To help tackle the climate emergency in particular, we need to continue to attract fine talent into our profession. The number of chemical engineering students in the UK and elsewhere remains strong, as you can see from this slide of UK numbers. So does the footprint of the topics where chemical engineers can deploy our skills, where there is a chemical and physical change: environmental, biological, medical, designing new materials, as well as our core heartland of manufacturing and energy. It's seen as a hard course and, vitally, not yet sufficiently clearly as a route to a profession that is making a big contribution to the climate emergency. Nor are prospective students and their teachers and parents aware of the way they develop their personal generic skills, which sets them up for these diverse careers based on technical and generic skills. We're especially valued for developing systems thinking, allowing us to tackle complex problems which have a considerable degree of uncertainty in a systematic way. Chemical engineering graduates are valued by many employers, some of which are not obviously involved in core chemical engineering topics. But our graduates do deploy the chemical engineering mindset. We'd like to retain a higher fraction of our chemical engineering graduates. Next one. We'd like to retain a higher fraction of chemical engineering graduates within our membership, and are looking at how we can best provide support and value. The numbers who are chartered has remained strong, so we can see from the dark blue one just towards the bottom there. But I would like to see more of our members becoming chartered, which will demonstrate their commitment to high standards. Our profession is very international, and that is reflected in the IChemE footprint across over 100 countries. The basis of the problems we tackle are very similar across the world, even if the context is different. Across the world, societies are looking towards certain professions as people they can trust to tackle climate change. The climate emergency and making the world sustainable is the great challenge of our time. We chemical engineers have a central role in this through designing industrial processes, urban systems, and many everyday operations to be more sustainable and eventually net zero. Our skill set puts us right at the heart of the challenge through devising the best use of energy and materials to satisfy and limit the demand of our fellow citizens. IChemE has this at the heart of our strategy, guided by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I was struck by this quote from Sir Alexander Gibbs' presidential address in 1928. The unceasing cry goes up from industry: cheap power, more cheap power, and still more cheap power. We still want cheap power, but not at any cost. The world is more complex now. We need cheap, renewable power, and the current global political situation has focused us on having reliable sources also. IChemE's Learned Society Committee has the following 3 areas of focus: responsible production, major hazards management, and digitalisation, which demonstrate our profession's commitment to safe, sustainable, and innovative practice. Responsible production. The Learned Society Committee have also produced a climate change position statement, which has been very well received. Thanks to a generous donation from past President Ian Schott, IChemE recently launched the new Sustainability Hub, which I encourage you all to visit and follow the training courses that are free to all members. Process systems engineering is a real enabler for digitalisation to make the most of the compute power and seemingly endless data that we now have available. Digitalisation is changing all aspects of life, and the process industry is able to exploit its potential to increase efficiency and robustness and to make industries more dynamically responsive to society's needs. Our role in promoting more sustainable ways of operating is one of the ways in which we seek to be ethical. But what do I mean by ethical? We've had the benefit of an excellent education and earned it, and we all have a duty to make the most of it for ourselves and our families, but also for our friends, colleagues, and fellow citizens. Showing that our decisions and behaviours can be trusted in an ethical sense allows us to step up and be part of the major decisions. It means that we are not just trusted by our employer and colleagues, but also by our fellow citizens. I was asked a couple of years ago to chair a new engineering ethics reference group by the UK's Royal Academy of Engineering and Engineering Council. And our report was published recently. And I was given today, I think I'm talking in a particularly topical thing to say. This was the headline from the Metro from today. The only way is ethics. The Metro is a London paper. So I think this is a particularly timely contribution that we're making, certainly in this country, and I think everywhere. While engineers are broadly trusted, there have been some major tragedies that have brought this into question, such as the Boeing 737 MAX and Grenfell tragedies. Neither of these were chemical engineering, but we are not immune. You may have seen that we're exploring ethics in a series of articles in the Chemical Engineer magazine as well. If engineers at the Bhopal plant had insisted that the plant be operated to Western safety standards, perhaps that disaster would not have occurred. Over past decades, we have put health and safety at the centre of our professionalism and our education. More recently, this has also been true of sustainability. Now we need to ensure that the same thing is true of ethical thinking. Safety and sustainability are part of the ethical code that we must all aspire to and for which we must train the next generations. The new Sustainability Hub has a training course on ethics free for members, which I commend to you, and I expect many companies have their own. The key message from our engineering ethics report is that we need to ensure we all think ethics before action. As we prepare alternative solutions and make recommendations to our managers or our clients, we should be ensuring that the ethical implications are considered and discussed. It's increasingly the case that ethical investors are asking hard questions about the ethical consequences of decisions on the environment, on local communities, on employment, on diversity, and of course, how sustainable a solution might be, considering all three legs of the sustainability challenge: economic, environmental, and social. The ethical course of action is often not clear. We need to be preparing chemical engineers to be able to have these discussions in a systematic way. We aren't making ethicists, or even philosophers, of us all, but do need to be able to discuss and explore these issues in an open and non-confrontational way, being objective as far as we can, but recognizing that many ethical issues are subjective, which requires bringing in diverse views. In universities, we can consider this right across our courses, solving problems and then exploring the ethical consequences of alternative solutions. Many years ago, I was supervising a chemical engineering design project for the manufacture of precursors to polyurethane. A key route involved the production of phosgene, known of course to be a very toxic gas. One of the students said we couldn't do this because it was illegal to manufacture it in the UK. Interested by this, I did some exploring and discovered the manufacture at the time was indeed illegal, but only in Northern Ireland, for obvious reasons, and not in other parts of the UK. We discussed the ethics of using products that were made from intermediates that were to be made offshore, introducing significant safety problems to other countries. We would reap the benefits, but would not be willing to take the necessary risks ourselves. Is it ethical? It was a rich discussion with many viewpoints aired. Decisions are often not clear, and there are always trade-offs to be made. We need to encourage the discussion and debate, ensuring that diverse views are properly considered, encouraging all members of our teams to express their views and to be heard. This leads to more informed and accountable decisions. We may not agree with a particular decision, but in this way concerns have been raised and heard and considered. You may be aware of the case of a chemical engineer in the USA promising a comprehensive blood test device. In fact, the device had not been developed in spite of assurances to investors. Clearly this was unethical and in fact illegal, as was the Volkswagen diesel scandal, testing scandal. These two last are at the extreme end. However, we confront ethical issues every day about choosing materials, making design choices about effluents, guarding confidential information that may compromise decisions, and treating our colleagues in a fair and open manner when conflicts arise. All of these provide ethical dilemmas and need reflection and judgment about ethical consequences. This is what we meant by think ethics before action. By becoming a member of professional organisations such as IChemE, we are demonstrating a commitment to ethical principles, to the Statement of Ethical Principles published by the Engineering Council and Royal Academy of Engineering. I think this is a powerful force in recruiting potential young engineers who wish to work in an ethical profession. The Engineering Ethics Report I mentioned earlier proposes actions in 5 areas: leadership and accountability, education and training, professionalism, engagement and communication, and governance and measurement. The actions are being progressed by the Engineering Ethics Coordination Group. Some things can be done at a broad level, but much of the heavy lifting needs to be done by each of the professional engineering institutions, since we are the ones with close oversight, in our case, of the profession of chemical engineering. We are on that journey already through things like the Sustainability Hub and its ethical training. During my presidential year, I plan to press forward, as I see it as key to our core mission as a professional society and as a key proposition for attracting talented young people into our profession. We highlighted leadership as a core part of ethics. Leadership not just by those ultimately responsible for decisions, but by all members of the team at all levels within an organisation. I had the privilege some years ago of working with Martti Ahtisaari, Nobel Peace Laureate and a former president of Finland. That's Martti in the middle. I involved him with our research students. We were looking at how to support research students in the Arab Spring, what was then called the Arab Spring part of the world. And this was him discussing leadership in a time of crisis with a number of our research students from Syria, Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. And maybe I will say, such an impressive man that he said to me, "What message do you want to get?" I said, "I want you to give them hope." And he said, "I come from Finland, and in 1917, we were on our knees in the middle of a huge civil war." And it, of course, went on from there. And that's exactly the sort of message that, of course, they wanted to hear, that not to give up hope on the countries where they came from. So Martti articulated a very inclusive vision of leadership, empowering those around him at all levels to step up and be heard. Chemical engineers need to be ready to be heard. As well as raising technical points of concern within their team, this also means talking to society about what we do and why we do it. These days, students are more ready to make interventions in class, perhaps to the irritation of some of my colleagues, but I see this as a very good thing. Of course, we know that some are more willing to speak than others, so a key role as educators and managers is to encourage all to speak up so that we hear from the diverse group that we aim to have. This is vital for making our contribution to the climate emergency. I was struck reading Amanda Doyle's TCE article about COP26 that she felt that it was the whitest COP ever. Developing countries and indigenous peoples really felt excluded. Tackling the climate emergency really needs a fully diverse set of views. We too have a challenge. Big challenge to ensure that our profession is diverse. Encouraging diverse views can be especially valuable in bringing different perspectives to ethical considerations. There have been actions regarding gender and ethnicity, but the progress is slow. Chemical engineering programs in Denmark and Spain have 50% females. Of course, every country has particular social pressures, but these are two countries with very different traditions, and yet they have managed this. Interestingly, I've raised the issue of ethnic diversity of doctoral candidates in the different Lira universities, but they do not yet consider this carefully. In France, it's illegal to even ask about ethnicity. All are French. We also consider disability, which certainly remains a challenge in the researcher community. Engineering was always seen to be a route up to the economic and social ladder, but I wonder if we are so successful now. Are we truly open to drawing a diverse community in? There is progress, but it is slow. We want to draw in talent from across a truly diverse population to reflect all in our society. We want to make chemical engineering attractive and seen as a diverse and socially responsible profession. Once we have them on board, we need to build their skills and experience, encourage through diverse activities, developing both technical competence and also social competence. And this means competence, not just confidence, in considering ethical applications, defending their views and communicating them to colleagues, friends and society more generally. IChemE's current strategy runs until 2024. We're in the process of developing a new strategy leading up to 2028, building on the work of ChemEng Evolution. A draft strategy will be developed in the coming months through our key committees and Congress. The draft will be the basis for a member consultation in early 2023. After revisions on the basis of these consultations, we expect the Board of Trustees to sign off in July 2023, leading to a public launch in September 2023. We hope you will all engage in this process, develop a strategy to inspire the whole profession to play its part in addressing the challenges ahead. These may be challenging times, but it is clear to me that the future of chemical engineering is bright. We must work with others, but we are key players in tackling the climate emergency and are increasingly being seen as such. As IChemE, we represent the chemical engineering profession, and I hope by being clear about our commitment to safety, sustainability, diversity and ethics, we can attract more members to see it clearly as a commitment to these values. For my title, I contemplated putting a question mark after an ethical profession. But I do believe that we are an ethical profession, although there is more to do. But most of all, we need to be clear to society, and particularly to potential students, that we are an ethical profession and to clearly demonstrate this. I particularly want to thank all the IChemE volunteers who play such a vital role in shaping the future of our profession. You play a central role in so many of our operational processes, committees, accreditation, interviewing candidates for chartership and so on. I hope to engage you all in this discussion about ethics. Everything needs ethical reflection. We all contribute to the success of IChemE in the last century and the next. Members, volunteers and staff together. I would also like to thank many colleagues across the world for their fellowship in my journey, from UCL, from IChemE staff, the European Federation of Chemical Engineering, the Royal Academy of Engineering, LIRU, and of course all my chamber music friends who keep me sane. I would also thank my daughter, an engineering student, studying acoustics and music, who's here tonight, somewhere. And to thank my late wife Jenny, who very sadly passed away some years ago. I think you're all aware how dynamic the profession of chemical engineering is. We're embracing the broader employment opportunities, digitalization as it changes how we work, and most of all, to play our key role in facing the great challenges that face society, particularly the climate emergency, in an ethical way. I'm looking forward enormously to this presidential year. I hope to get around the UK in a way that has been impossible in the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to a trip to Malaysia, Singapore and Australia later in the year. I very much look forward to further celebrations of our centenary, to raising our profile beyond our membership, and to meeting with many of you in person as much as possible over the coming year. Thank you for putting your confidence in me.
Thank you very much indeed, David, for a splendid, and I mean splendid, presidential address. As well as being the Master of Ceremonies here tonight, it's your misfortune that I'm also here to give the vote of thanks, but I'm delighted to do so, okay? But I also realise that you came here to listen to David, not to listen to me, so I am going to be mercifully brief. Maybe a little longer than you wish, but nevertheless as brief as I can be. I'd like to start, though, by joining David in thanking John Pritchard, who will be leaving us shortly. The reason I'd like to do it is because IChemE may never trust me ever again to stand at a lectern and address any of you. So thank you, John, for everything you've done. IChemE is in a much better place because of you. Thank you. I could comment on all sorts of bits of your address there, David, but mercifully I shall spare you from all the bits there because you don't want to listen to me. It was interesting to hear about your research, hear about your teaching, and he's told one or two people this evening, but David has a sort of special record, and you may wonder how he survived it, because David was in my first ever lecture. Okay? And it was bloody awful, okay, if I may say so. So well done, David. And the lad has turned out well despite that, hasn't he? So thank you for that. Of course, the core of David's address, and we could talk about all the little bits, but was about seeking ways for chemical engineers to work in an ethical way. And absolutely, we've actually got to show how what we do, what we decide, how we act can be trusted. And as you said, not just by employers, not just by colleagues, but by the general public. That's the big challenge for us to be to solve there. And I like your way of splitting up your safety. We put it at heart, I guess, probably post-Flixbus for 74 onwards, nearly 50 years. That's been at the heart of chemical engineering. You wouldn't dream of waking up and doing a job without it. Sustainability is getting there now, and is obviously the big thing to do there. But then the third part of the triumvirate is ethics, and we've simply got to put it there so it's part of our everyday life. Absolutely. And indeed, something I've noticed talking to young engineers, particularly in ChemEng, applying for jobs, is that nowadays they, by and large, only want to work in companies that they perceive to work in an ethical way. That's the way they're going to be. So recruitment is going to be hard if you're not perceived to be in such an industry, I think. You concluded only a moment ago by thanking us for putting our confidence in you. And let me say that by your address, you've shown us that our confidence is extremely well placed. So I'd like to ask you to join in once again in showing David our appreciation. Thank you very much, David. And that concludes the formal proceedings this evening. We're now going to adjourn to the Mountbatten room, which is through and where we were just before, where there will be liquid refreshment. Thank you all very much.